Standing before the rickshaw, my father made certain I wore my topi to protect my head from the sun. He himself wore a cork helmet that snapped under the chin. Abdul handed up a leather box tied firmly with straps, and Yali slipped me a package containing fruit and cakes. We proceeded along a narrow but firmly packed path running perpendicular to the river. Soon we stopped amid a collection of mud huts clustered under tall shade trees, each with an untidy garden. Beyond them stretched miles of verdant fields that from a distance seemed to have been sprinkled with streaks of icing sugar. As we came closer, I peered more intently, and I could see the whiteness was the petals of millions of gorgeous flowers undulating in the breeze. "What are they?" I asked, as Papa helped me down. I ran to the head of a blooming row and breathed in the lavish fragrance. Poppies. Poppies. My hand brushed a cluster of fringed blossoms that were so ripe the petals flew off like frightened moths. They fluttered a long while in the air currents before settling on the reddish earth. Dazzled by the effect, I moved a few feet down the row and tried again. "Oh!" I cried in delight, running down the slender path between the rows, my fingertips jostling the feathery petals lightly, but having the effect of a scythe. "Poppies! Poppies! Poppies!" I shouted to the wind. A shower of white billowed up around me as I made my way back up a second row. Breathless, I met up with my father again. I shook the petals from my hair and grinned. "Why have we come to see them?" "Because these flowers are my business, the Sassoon family trade." "You own these fields?" "Not exactly. The government owns them, but we will buy most of the crop when it comes to auction in Calcutta later in the year." "So you sell flowers?" "Yes, Tina." "I don't see how you can get them to China before they die." He threw his head back and laughed so hard he had to wipe his tearing eyes. "Today you will learn everything there is to know about poppies." He plucked a flower. "This is Papaver somniferum," he said in a reverential tone. "The most prized flower in the world. Not only is it beautiful, it contains a secret substance that eliminates pain, cures diseases, and makes men happy." "Everyone must want it then." "Yes, and they will pay dearly for it." He twisted the stem, almost the thickness of my little finger, back and forth. The translucent petals vibrated prettily. "Our little secret is that it is quite easy to grow and process. We purchase it for a handful of rupees and sell it for baskets of silver." My mother had told me tales of weaving straw into gold, explaining these were mere stories, but the idea of converting a plant to a valuable mineral was true. My father plucked the petals and held up the naked, unripened seed capsule. Its pale green flesh, the color of a baby frog, glistened with dew. "Watch this." He took a knife from his pocket and made 3 vertical slashes in the fat pulp. "This is called lancing." A sticky milk like white blood began to ooze out. "Lacrima papaveris." He studied the droplets as though they were precious works of art. "The tears of the poppy." Every spring when the petals begin to drop, the villagers cut the bulbs in the afternoon, leaving the sap to drip slowly out during the night. The next morning, the congealed blackish fluid is scraped off before the heat makes it stick too tightly. This they do about 10 times until the head is exhausted and bleaches out. Later you will see what becomes of the residue. Intrigued, I followed my father on his rounds. We passed through miles of fields. Large flocks of birds wheeled like hovering clouds overhead. They are after the wheat or maize, which is alternated with the poppies, my father explained. He pointed out a distant platform raised upon poles to a height of 20 feet over the fields. When we came closer, I could see a small boy stationed there. After several birds began diving at the grain, the boy lifted a simple sling and selected a stone from a basket. With a graceful arch of his back, an unerring stone met its mark. "Oh no!" I cried in sympathy at the plummeting bird. It must be done as a warning to the rest of the flock. "Look." I followed Papa's gaze as the dark cloud looped up and back, away from the boy on the platform. "Who cares for these fields?" I asked as we walked out to inspect an area. "Ryots or cultivators lease them from the crown. The ryot plows his field, removes the weeds and grass before dividing it into beds with those higher dikes between them." He showed me a tank about 10 feet deep, dug at one end of the field, and pulled out a leather bucket attached to a rope. "Water is taken from here and used to irrigate the fields, which is necessary because most of the poppy cultivation is done after the monsoon. The seed is sown in November, the juice collected in February and March. Come, I will show you how that actually is accomplished." At the far end of the field, dozens of women were scarifying the seed pods that had already been scraped that morning. A lady in a billowing pink sari greeted my father respectfully, her hands cupped in a triangle, her head bowed. My father showed me the instrument she carried. It had 4 two-pointed blades bound together with cotton thread. This is called a nutshell. Only one set of points is used at one time as the capsule is cut vertically from base to summit. He returned the tool to its worker and pointed to a collector who was working on another row. With swift, decisive movements, the man used an iron scoop to collect the brown sap that had oozed out during the night, and as it became filled, he emptied it into an earthen pot strapped on his side. From time to time, he wet the scoop and his fingers with linseed oil carried in a small jar tucked into his dhoti. On dry days like today, he needs the oil to prevent the addition of the sticky juice. On moist days, his work is easier, but a portion of the sap is washed away, or worse, it becomes watery. That results in a lower grade, called pasewa, for which we get less money. "Can't you dry it to get the water out?" I wondered. Papa beamed. "How your questions please me. You must have flowers in your blood. Come, see what happens next." The rickshawala spit out his beetle juice and ready to take us. My father offered me water from a jug and gave me a slice of melon as we headed back toward the town by another route. On the outskirts of Patna, we came across an enormous mass of brick buildings with red tiled roofs. A wonderful fresh-mown smell permeated the exterior, where men wielding wooden paddles stirred shallow trays of the tarry exudate. Here, the gum dries in the sun for 1 to 3 weeks to remove the water content. "So the drier the sap, the shorter the time it must cook in the sun," I said matter-of-factly. "I shall have to put you to work," he said, grinning. He pointed to men bending over a table in the shade of a shed. They seemed to be kneading sticky rolls of black bread. When dried, the opium is formed into 3 loaves. Opium. This was the first time I had heard that word connected with the day's activities. Where had I heard it before? Mother. The trial. I recalled my mother's silver and ivory hookah that had been thrown on the pyre of her possessions. An image formed, my mother's languorous body stretched out on the chase, her dimpled mouth sipping the fragrant smoke from the ivory mouthpiece, the smell of opium mingling with roses, clove incense, and her own particular musk could be recalled more readily than the elusive image of her oval face or shimmering eyes. The memory of Mama and the hookah mingled with the green of the scored poppy husk and ripe black sludge in the processing trays. Mama drank opium, I stated, somewhat inaccurately, because I had confused the sipping sounds from the mouthpiece that led to the tubes with the inhalation of smoke. My father stared at me with such cold fury, I knew I was right. Unfortunately, it caused her to be ill. Why? You said it cured disease and made people happy. Didn't you want Mama to be happy? When you are older, you will learn that it is possible to take too much of a good thing, was his perplexing response. Like eating too many jalebis. In a way. Or having too many friends. I don't understand. If you have too many, you might not know which are good friends and which are bad, I dared, since I was still trying to sort out questions about Nissim Sadka. Some people are more easily fooled than others, he replied elliptically. I won't be fooled. I never liked any of them. I'm sure you won't. My father's frown should have warned me off, but I only went back to the first topic. Why didn't you tell her to stop when she took too much opium? That's enough, Tina. But she would have listened to you. She didn't. He turned his back to indicate the subject was closed. Since my mother always seemed to defer to my father, I found this difficult to comprehend, but said nothing more as we passed behind the guards who observed the workers, many of whom were young children. A man wearing a gun weighed out a quantity of the black mass and handed it to a man who carried a numbered ticket. Next down the line, a woman sat on a high stool in front of 2 basins. The first basin contained sufficient opium for 3 balls. The lower one held water. She lifted a brass hemispherical cup into which she worked the ball, moistening it as she rolled it into a neat 6-inch sphere. Then it was passed to a child who had a tray with 2 compartments, one containing thin pancakes of pressed poppy petals, the other a cupful of sticky opium water. After rolling the ball in the water, the boy crunched it with the petals and a mixture of coarsely powdered poppy stalks, capsules, and leaves. The last man weighed the ball, adding to or decreasing the mass to make a consistent product. A young runner then carried the finished balls outside and placed them on pallets in the sun. Our tour finished inside the godown, a cool, dark storehouse where the dried cakes were lined in frames. They will remain here through the summer. The boys will watch to be certain they are not attacked by weevils, turning them to prevent mildew. By next October, they will be completely dry, hard, and in condition to be packed into cases of 40 cakes each. The cases will be auctioned in Calcutta, where the Sassoons will buy them for delivery to the Chinese market. My heart pounded fiercely. Are you going back to China? Of course. My stricken face alarmed him, and he put his arm around my quaking shoulders. That's a long time off, after the auction in October. Let's not think of it now. An Indian manager, a gomast, dressed primly in a suit with a vest, approached my father and handed him a sheaf of accounting papers. Papa loosened his grip on me and eased himself away. The 2 men walked off to a corner of the godown and conferred about the figures. A tide of emotion swept over me. What would I do without a mother or a father? My stomach contracted. The air in the musty godown clogged my throat. I made my way to the nearest door, opposite the one we had entered, feeling frightened and sorry for myself. A muffled, almost animal-like howl startled me. I looked up to see, across the yard, a boy being beaten with one of the wooden paddles used to stir the raw opium. One worker held him down and tried to silence him, while another struck his shoulders, his buttocks, and the back of his leg so forcefully I could hear the crack of the wood against his frail bones. Another boy heaved and sputtered as buckets of water were poured over him as he stood in a deep vat. I ran for my father. "Papa!" As I grabbed his arm, several documents fell to the mucky ground. Not caring, I urgently pulled him toward the yard. "Dina, oh, what is... Come, a boy is hurt." "Hurt? An accident?" he asked as he let me lead him. By the time we got there, the first boy was slumped against the wall. Huge welts were splayed on his back and chest. The thin skin around his ribs had burst. Blood trickled in rivulets, pooling at his waist. The other boy, still standing in the tub, was being brushed with harsh twig brooms. Everyone froze as my father looked at the injured children, then back at me. The brutality ceased. Now my father would punish the cruel bosses. "That is enough," was all he said as he led me away. "It's not what you think, Dina. Those boys are thieves. The workers are recovering what was stolen and making certain the culprits have learned their lesson." Tears welled in my eyes. "But how?" "Listen to me, Dina. Those boys rolled around in the poppy residue, coating their bodies with opium. If a boy can escape unnoticed to the bazaar, bad men will wash him down to distill and collect the residue, paying him 4 or 5 annas. You would not object to someone being beaten for stealing my purse, would you? Well, that powder is almost as valuable as gold. Why, one go-down alone contains more than 10 lakhs of opium. If we let one boy off lightly, the others will take the risk. By beating one, we prevented 100 more crimes." I trembled with exhaustion as much as confusion as my father carried me to the home of the Gomast, where we were given a simple meal of rice and fish. I slept the whole way back to our lodgings, awaking only when Yali prepared me for bed. I let her tuck me in, pretending to sleep until she snored rhythmically beside me on the floor. Then I got up and opened the door to my father's bedroom. He slept alone. I climbed in beside him and fell asleep. After that, I spent every night with him until we made our way back to Calcutta, and everything changed again.